So in this video, we are going to be correcting our radical worksheet. So this is your radical worksheet and how to simplify radicals. So the square root of 252, let's see, is 36 times 7. So the square root of 36 is 6. So this is 6 root 7. Now, if you didn't see that right away and you did 252 and you divided by 4, you would get the square root of 4 and the square root of 63. So then we would have the square root of 4 and the square root of 9 and the square root of 7. So the square root of 4 is 2, the square root of 9 is 3, and then we still have the square root of 7. So 2 times 3 is 6, so this ends up 6 root 7. All right, 324 is actually a perfect square. The square root of 324, I believe, is 18. All right, the square root of 32. So this is going to be 4 and 16 times 2. And the square root of 16 is 4. So this is going to be 16 root 2. All right, 256. So what goes into 256 evenly? If I divide by 4, I have 3, and then I have the square root of 4 goes in there evenly, and that gives me 64. So this is going to be 3 times 2 times 8. So 8 times 2 is 16, so the square root of 256 is actually 16, and 16 times 3 gives us 48. All right, number 9. There's a couple different ways you can do number 9. One way is to multiply it together, so we take 3 times 2 and get 6, and then the square root of 10 and the square root of 6 is 60. Now, break this up. So what perfect square is in 60, and 4 times 15 gives you 60. So we have 6 times 2 times root 15. So we have 12 root 15. Another way is I look at 10 and I look at 6, and they are both even numbers. So I could take 3 times square root of 2, square root of 5. Then I still have that 2 in there, and the square root of 2 and the square root of 3. Now remember, we said if we take the square root of 2 times the square root of 2, that gives you 2. And 3 times 2 is 6, and then we still have the square root of 5 and 3 is 15. So 6 times 2 is 12, root 15. So there is more than one way to go ahead and solve these. All right, what do we have here in 11? So again, you can multiply them together and take 3 times, and then 12 times 6 is going to give you 72, and then you can break this down from here. So 3 is going to be, and then 72 is 36 times 2. So the square root of 36 is 6. 3 times 6 is 18, root 2. Now, if I were doing this, I would probably break up, because if things match, I would break up the square root of 12 into the square root of 2 and the square root of 6, because this square root of 6 times this square root of 6 gives me 6 times 3 times root 2, and then I would do 18 root 2. So you can look for matching things, square root of 6 and square root of 6, or multiply it together. All right, number 13. I would probably multiply this together to take negative 4 times the square root of 60, because we just did the square root of 60. And that is going to break up into 4 times 15. So we have negative 4 times 2 times the square root of 15. So we have negative 8 root 15. All right, so I look in here, and there's again a couple different ways that we can do this. So the square root of 18 is the square root of 9 and the square root of 2. The square root of 8 is the square root of 4 times the square root of 2. Okay, so I have 5 root 4 root 2, and this one is root 9 root 2. So what happens here is square root on top, square root on the bottom. These guys simplify to 1. The square root of 4 is 2, so 5 times 2 is 10. And the square root of 9 is 3, so 10 over 3. Or some of you might want to just go ahead and write that as 3 1/3. All right, the square root of 9 is 3, so 4 times 3 is 12. So on the bottom, I end up with 12. Now we can't leave that like that, and these 12s cannot simplify. But on the top, root 4 and root 3 gives you 12, and I still have my 12 on the bottom. So this is 2 root 3 over 12, and these simplify so that this is root 3 over 6. 2 and 2/12 simplifies to 1/6. All right, we've got a square root of 15 on the bottom. So right now, my mind's just kind of going ahead of itself here. And as I'm trying to decide what way to do it, my brain is saying 15 breaks up into root 3 and root 5. And the reason I wanted to do that is because these root 3s are going to cancel out. So what I'm really dealing with right now is 3 over root 5. Okay, and we know we are not allowed to leave a square root in the denominator, so we multiply by that fancy 1. So I'm going to multiply by the square root of 5 over the square root of 5. So then on top, when I multiply these out, I get 3 root 5. And on the bottom, root 5 times root 5 is 5. So the final answer is 3 root 5 over 5. All right, when we look at number 21 here, the square root of 9 is 3. So when I simplify that, I get 3 over root 15. Okay, now this 15 on the bottom is not simplified, and we don't have any perfect squares in it. So I'm going to multiply by the square root of 15 over the square root of 15. So now when I multiply across the top, I get 3 root 15. And then on the bottom, root 15 times root 15 is 15. And now we need to simplify that. 3 goes into 15, so I still have root 15 on top, and 3 goes into 15 5 times. All right, is that it? Oh, 23, this is our last one. Okay, square root of 32 is the square root of 16 times the square root of 2. 8 can be broken up into the square root of 4 and the square root of 2. So the square root of 16 is 4. So I end up with negative 12 root 2. All right, 3 and then 3 times 2 root 2. So I have plus 3 times 2 is 6 root 2. Now, these are like terms because they both have root 2, root 2. So these are like terms, so I'm going to keep the root 2, and then we add and subtract our coefficients. So we have negative 12 plus 6. So we have negative 6 root 2 is our final answer. Okay, I think we start going into the evens now. Alrighty, so that should be the end of what you guys had for the worksheet.